Good afternoon, family. Good afternoon, family. All right. Let's get a huge applause for Vera that is in the house with us. I stand and greet you in solidarity. I salute everyone that is present here today. And let me be transparent. I am an angry African woman. I am angry about injustice. I am angry about people that are too poor to pay their bail or locked in jail. Because of their low wages, there are people that are held in Silverdale cages. I am angry about public harm. Are you angry too? Do we need public safety? Do we need to end public harm? Do we need to organize people and organize money to end cash bail? Would you have been with biblical Caleb? Would you have been an abolitionist during the times of enslavement? Huh? Would you have been with John Brown? Would you have been with Harriet Tubman? Would you have been on the Underground Railroad? Well, my answer to you is, if you're not doing it now, you would not have done it then. Because slavery didn't end, it evolved. Mass incarceration is the new enslavement. It is the new Jim Crow. And right here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, we have a choice. Do something or do nothing.
As a Hamilton County Commissioner, the conversation around incarceration and bail reform is important to me for several reasons. One, prolonged detention, I should say first and foremost, prolonged detention prior to trial when public safety is not in jeopardy is fundamentally wrong and harmful to individuals, to families, and in turn all of our community. America's history of jails over the past 40 years shows us that every time we build additional prison beds, we can find reasons to keep those beds full, regardless of whether crime goes up or down. We need to be able to have open, honest, and informed conversations about what works and what doesn't work. Rightly or wrongly, people in our community have legitimate fears about whether people are being held responsible for criminal acts or whether release pending trial threatens public safety. At the same time, some of us in this community believe people should be treated fairly. Courts should treat people as innocent until proven guilty. And that the mere accusations shouldn't be able to ruin people's lives. And it does.
Let's talk about what this looks like here locally. What is the pretrial process? So in Hamilton County, if you are arrested, then you get brought down to Silverdale, going to go through a booking process, and then you're going to see a court official, a magistrate, and that magistrate's job is to be able to review your charges, make sure they're legit. It's a legit charge. You're not being written up for nonsense that's not part of criminal code. And they're also going to judge a couple of things. They're going to be judging whether or not you should have bail. All right? Now, bail is the money that individuals have to put down to secure their release. They can also divert you to pretrial services, which in Hamilton County operates like a pretrial probation. It's additional restrictions, maybe on top of bail, maybe not including bail, that could include electronic monitoring, site visits with probation officers and the like, in between your court case, in between the time of arrest and your court case. There's also the opportunity that magistrates have right now in Hamilton County to offer unsecured bonds, what are called own recognizance bonds. It means that you are pledging to show up to court. No money down, no money required. Okay, so let's talk about what happens with money bond. You'll typically get a deal. If your bond is $5,000, then you could pay $500 up front, sign, secure your release, and then you're out. Now, what happens to that money? You paid your bondsman, that's a fee. Okay, so whether you're in a week or 2 weeks, you're found not guilty, all your charges are dismissed, you're never seeing that money again. Okay? You can also put up the full amount yourself. Oftentimes, people are not in the opportunity, if they're just going through a jail experience, to be able to do that. Now, what happens if you can't afford bail? Well, you get kicked back into the system. You immediately go and you're waiting your time at Silverdale in custody. In Hamilton County, they're putting you in front of a judge 10 days later. I want you to think about that, okay? If you're arrested and you can't pay your bond, regardless of the veracity of charges against you, then you could be held in custody for 10 days or even longer waiting for your time. What does that do to you? Okay? For individuals and families that are suffering under that, then you are under threat. There's a clear harm that's happening for folks who are kept in custody that are threatened with the loss of their job, with loss of custody of children oftentimes, with the ability to pay your mortgage or your rent. But you're also under pressure in order to get this done as quickly as possible, to plead out to whatever charge you can in order to get out. And you're oftentimes in a situation where you're going to forego your right to a trial. This is a big deal, all right? We have this understanding in the United States that there is a way that criminal justice happens, and you go and you see Matlock on television, right? And you see a trial, and you're in front of a judge, and there's an attorney here, and there's an attorney there, and they're arguing about this case, all right? In actuality, 94% of cases in the United States that are held in local courts, or you don't go to trial. You don't have a trial in front of a judge. They're arranged via plea deals, all right? We've talked about, and you've heard from Reverend Charlotte here about mass incarceration. I want to make sure that everybody in the room understands what mass incarceration is and why this is so important to the conversation. Mass incarceration refers to a phenomenon in the United States that has taken place since the 1970s. Up to 2.2 million people in the United States that are held in custody at this point, all right? Out of those, on any given night, 450,000 Americans are in jail, local jails all across the United States, not because they've been found guilty of a crime, but because they're there in a pretrial situation. That's just the United States, right? Where does Tennessee fit into this? Tennessee actually incarcerates well above the United States average. We are number 2 for jail admissions among these southern states, but we're actually number 1. We have the largest number of people that are kept in custody pre-trial. This is a statistic that we were able to pull information from August of last year, that at that time, nearly 80% of people that were being kept in custody at Silverdale were there pre-trial. 80. I want you to look at the number of people that are kept in custody locally. This has grown. So this is between November of 2019 and February of this year, right? That just pretrial misdemeanors have grown by over 13% locally. From 23%, you see this first dip here, that was because of COVID. But this small dip and massive increase happened when the Sheriff's Department took back over the county jail. Okay, so let's talk about what we have done about it so far. We find this to be unjust, wrong, but it's also inefficient, it's ineffective, it's remarkably expensive for the county, right? And so we want to intervene. In October of 2018, we launched the Hamilton County Community Bail Fund, which is a revolving fund account that allows us to post bond for individuals that can't post for themselves. Last year alone, we were able to post 129 bonds for individuals. You know what the wonderful thing about this is it's a revolving fund account. As long as people show up to their court case, we get that money back to be used for the next individual, okay? And as statistics, as of the beginning of this year, for those that we are helping, that we are working with and partnering with to get out of local jail, our court attendance rate is 80%. And right now, our community is hearing from the sheriff that people that are there in Silverdale, it's because they're violent, it's because they're off the chain, it's because they're uncontrolled. How many of those individuals had all of their charges dismissed once they finally made it to court? What, 10%, 20%, 50? So it's 42%. 42% of individuals that are having all their charges dismissed. What does that mean? Well, it means that there are plenty of individuals that are going through the court system that the courts aren't finding the reason for them to be there, right? Now, this is important. These are important conversations. They're not easy conversations. And there are, as Commissioner Sharp said, there are people in this community that have legitimate fears. This might be happening, but how do we change while protecting ourselves and protecting our community, right? Right? These are key issues. We want to make sure that our community is safe, that if people are violent and on the streets, we want to make sure that they're not hurting other people. These are all values that we share. I'm going to leave this up to Reverend Charlotte, but if the folks from Vera could come up, let's give them a round of applause.
The majority of people who are in our nation's jails on any given day are legally innocent. They have been charged with something and have not yet been convicted of that offense. And we see nationally that's about 2/3 of people, but it fluctuates, right? Sometimes in some jails it's an even higher proportion. I also want to say, when we talk about numbers, you know, there are more people in state and federal prisons than local jails on any given day in this country, but people cycle in and out of jails in a way that they don't for state and federal prisons. People are serving longer sentences usually, but there are nearly 11 million admissions to jails every year, to local jails. So we see that people who are unconvicted, that a staggering number in this county who will eventually have their charges dismissed, as Michael said, are having their lives totally destabilized by going into that jail. And we also know, as we can talk about more, that just that act of crossing the jail threshold and staying there even for a few days can actually make people more likely to be arrested in the future. And so it's not a public safety system, right? It is a system, as you said, of harm, of public harm for a great many people.
Let's talk about public safety. Does our current cash bail system protect victims? Does it protect the broader community in general?
That pretrial detention actually increases the likelihood of future court or criminal legal system involvement. But we also know, right, that very often victims and survivors' voices are not really represented in these proceedings at all. That people, when asked, and there has been a national survey of crime survivors, do not say in the vast majority, we want everyone to go to prison and jail. They are interested, many survivors of crime, in addressing root causes, in saying we want to see investments in communities, in resources, in things that can help people who are survivors heal, not for you all to just build more prisons and more jails.
Thank you.
I was going to say very briefly, I think,
Yes.
you know, to go back to the Michael's Matlock example, you know, I was a public defender for a long time, and one thing that even like at our bond hearings, right, so you've been arrested, you went to the magistrate, they decided to hold you, then you're waiting 10 days, and then you think, ooh, I'm going to go before a judge, it's going to be like Law and Order. It's not. You know, you may not have met your attorney beforehand. They don't know who you are. They don't know where you live. They don't know about your family at home. And, you know, you're lucky if it lasts a minute. You're lucky if they even talk to the prosecutor before your case. If the attorney has even seen the file, seen the evidence, seen the arrest report. And so it's really like a cattle call. And then, you know, you may say, you know, I was a public defender, I did not do this. But oftentimes you say like, oh, I can't afford that. And they'll just say like, oh, tough, you know? Because they're under a burden. You know, we don't fund public defense and indigent defense the way that we should, and we all pay for it on the back end because it's people just end up taking pleas in exchange for their freedom.
If a judge really finds that someone is such a threat to the community that they cannot be out pre-trial, then they need to make that finding in a constitutionally adequate way on the record, right? And so that wasn't happening in Alamance, and they actually won a consent decree, which resulted in having to have counsel at first appearance and having to have a bond reduction hearing within 48 hours. That's just a victory in Alamance County that I think is a good model for other counties to really try to implement for local bail change.
All right.
What we often see, particularly in smaller communities, is that jail has been positioned as the first line response to all social problems.
The county commissioners can say the buck is going to actually stop with us. We are saying we no longer want to fill our jail with people that are charged with misdemeanors, nonviolent felonies, unless there's just an exception.
And I just want to add, because this is my constant mantra, right? I think that sounds like a really significant change, but it is not actually. When you look at recent history, as recently as the 90s, looking across the nation's biggest cities, 90% of people charged with felonies were released without money pre-trial.
Once again, could we all give them a round of applause again? I guess what I'll start with is the call to action. I encourage you all to engage in this, because we all have the opportunity to engage in some good trouble. And me being a formerly incarcerated male, I would have loved years ago to have the Hampton County Community Bail Fund to get me out. Many times I went in jail. So that's one of the things I say. I advocate for those that don't have a voice. I'm a formerly incarcerated man, and I advocate for all of those that feel like they are not, and they do not have anyone represent them. And I'm here standing in solidarity to say I'm representing them. And thank you all for coming out tonight. Appreciate you.